Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Metalman1245, and I'm here to ask the question: can you beat StarCraft 2 Heart of the Swarm without Sarah Kerrigan? I think the rules are pretty self-explanatory, so let's get right into it. But first is Lab Rat, a mission where you don't have access to any combat units besides the Zergling. So I guess I'll explain the rules I set for myself. Number 1. Kerrigan is not allowed to be used. I can't control her, she can't deal damage, take damage, collect bonus objectives, nothing. Number 2. Kerrigan passives at levels 10 and 35 are fine, since they're more quality of life changes than proper mega buffs, and I can't unchoose them anyway. Number 3. I will be playing on Brutal, but there may be a situation where dropping the difficulty will allow me to follow rule number 1, and that seemed the most appropriate. On to Back in the Saddle. A no-build mission with only this weird, uber-powerful stand-in character and an allied Jim Raynor. I tried to beat it by pushing Jim into the fray, but it's just not possible. I tried, and if I had direct control of Jim, he technically can beat the mission on his own if our unit is invulnerable, because he can't die. But the only way to beat this mission is so far removed from reality that I didn't bother and chalk this one up as a loss. Rendezvous is the first mission where this challenge actually comes into play. Without an early hero unit, the attack waves are actually pretty scary. Add onto that the 25% damage taken modifier on Brutal, and you can see why I died to the first attack wave. Just like Ladder Zerg, I had to make a decision on whether I could hold with my standing forces and build drones, or whether I needed Zerglings and Swarm Queens. As it turns out, the answer was mostly Spine Crawlers. They're pretty good. But then, with seconds on the clock, 2 siege tanks show up. I wasn't in a good position, and they siege up. This is bad. The timer expires, so I'll get a lot of reinforcements. I'm not going to die, but the siege tank is probably going to do a number on my forces. I brace for impact and... oh, they're gone. Apparently the siege tanks, and only the siege tanks, despawn with the reinforcement trigger, since the rest of the attack wave is... I run all my forces past the defenses and focus down the cannon. I honestly wasn't expecting this to work, but surprisingly, the Draken Pulse Cannon goes down with little issue. After looking at my options and deciding Char is scary, I go to Kaldr, the frozen moon of Protoss. Harvest of Screams isn't difficult once I get past the first section. I was reasonably sure I couldn't fight an Ursidon with just Zerglings, so I ran past him, expecting him to take chase, and then the Ursidon goes to my spawn point. Turns out you can just burrow, he gets confused, and you can run straight past him. He chills down there for the rest of the mission. Once I acquire the first roach, it's smooth sailing. Even halfway decent burrow micro means I don't have to lose forces to even the Ursidon Matriarch and her 2 bodyguards. Mysteriously, my units step onto the beacon that says, "Bring here," and it works to progress the mission. Huh. Weird. Once the Protoss are active, the mission isn't actually that bad. Build Zerglings with metabolic boosts, run into the Protoss camps, and snipe the spires before they can retaliate. And remember to kill the Ursidon Matriarch before accidentally winning. Oh, and also, don't die to the Ursidon counterattack. That didn't almost happen. Shoot the messenger I wasn't too worried about, and was right not to. While Kinetic Blast and Crushing Grip are
great for stopping those
shuttles, Hydralisks and Queens, with a few roaches for frontline support, don't really care too much about the limited number of ships defending the shuttles. And the only close call was when I decided targeting the shuttle that's farther away from the conduit was a good idea, and almost lose for the silliest reason. Enemy Within is a no-build mission with only Niadra. It's a free win. So while we're here, let's talk about bonus objectives. Past level 35, levels don't matter, since that's the level where you unlock the last passives that actually seem to do anything. Going into the run, I was concerned I wasn't going to be able to get enough levels, since a few bonus objectives require a character I don't seem to have to pick them up. But it really is just a few, and there was absolutely nothing to worry about. The bonus in this mission is an Ursidon that helps me fight. I tried to keep him alive, but micro was hard, so he died. But I still got the bonus points. Rest in peace, Ursidani. Waking the Ancient is laughably easy on a normal playthrough, and was only mildly more difficult here. In a different life, I may have decided to clear the entire map for no reason, because all the attack waves and meat waves are spawned in via triggers, and then just eked out to victory, but in this life I decided to take all 7 meat at once. But because I can't count, and I'm very bad at splitting my forces, it didn't really work. Oh well. I did still win handily. It just took a while longer while my army was awkwardly standing around doing nothing for a bit. The Crucible is a defense mission where somebody takes some acid and vibes for 30 minutes, so it plays as normal. But by now you may have noticed that every time Kerrigan is supposed to have dialogue, the subtitles say ... Well, this is because this is not stock Heart of the Swarm. I'm actually a semi-competent modder, so I made a version of Heart of the Swarm where she doesn't speak, because I thought it would be funny. But while I was in there, I decided to make my life a little bit easier, and disabled her spawn, and used a trigger to kill her immediately at the start of most missions, or take control away and make her invulnerable at the start of a mission like this one. This is why some beacons that are supposed to require Kerrigan now accept my army. I still implemented a cheat code to bring her back so that I couldn't softlock myself, but I decided that it was best to change spots where I knew I would have to use it anyway, instead of walking Kerrigan halfway across the map, though I honestly only changed one beacon and then decided that was way more of a pain than it was worth when I already had an emergency means of retaking control. And if you think my run is invalid because I modded the campaign, well, you do have a point. But I think this is way more fun, so I decided to do it anyway. Supreme is a no-build mission, intended to be a stomp with this brand new character that has a weird name. This and Conviction are the missions I was most worried about going into this run, and I was right to be, though there are some surprise difficult missions much later in the run besides Conviction. The opening section is impossible, and I decided the best way to do this was to run past the enemies, dealing no damage. That didn't take long. But then there's this section where Dahaka's roaches fight some hydralisks. It's also impossible. I check the triggers, and the roaches and hydralisks will spawn infinitely until something happens. At least on Brutal. I tried tanking for the roaches, but that didn't do it, so I ended up using Mend in the back. This was the only time I had to break rule number 1. Once the roaches joined my team, I relinquished control of whoever this random character is, and now my noble army of 4 roaches has to kill 22 Zerglings, 7 Hydralisks, 3 Ultralisks, and a Primal Pack Leader. In this section, the Yagdra section, and especially the boss fight, are by far the area I spent the longest in across the entire run, clocking in at 3 hours and 22 minutes in this section alone. Pulling the defenders apart was slow, but doable, and it turns out that roaches are exactly what was needed for this. In fact, the only unit that could do this. Them being able to burrow and significantly out-heal the regeneration of the enemies was an absolute necessity, both for my sanity and the actual possibility of this maneuver. I did lose a roach a few times, but the process boiled down to deal damage, burrow, heal, come back up. Whack a roach. Lovingly. But after that, I managed to enter Yagdra's chambers with 6 roaches, the maximum that I can have in this section. I was intended to fight a boss that infinitely spawns Zerglings, Hydralisks, and Ultralisks from eggs I didn't have nearly the DPS to kill, with 6 roaches. But I did make it work. What I settled on was this absolutely disgusting strategy of burrowing each individual roach in separate corners of the map, and unburrowing when Yagdra got close to one to deal some damage. Unburrow the furthest roach to get all of the spawns to move far enough away that the roach that needs to deal damage doesn't instantly die. I ended up dropping the difficulty down to casual, and the fight was barely easier. But it does turn out that every so often Yagdra's AI will break. And I believe this coincides with the line Fire Breath attack, because once she started using it, she wouldn't spawn eggs, would blast this random invulnerable civilian in the middle of the battle, and kill a lot of her own forces. This was the key to my victory, because after a while the battlefield looked like this. Yeah. Despite all of that, in my winning attempt I only had 3 roaches alive at the end, but concentrating for an hour straight at a time at least on relatively intense burrow micro will do that to you. But at least I get reinforcements, right? Oh. So it turns out that Dahaka's forces simply don't join you when you approach them. So now I have to beat the rest of the mission with 3 roaches? Well, not exactly. The forces at the beginning of Kraith's area are being stubborn, but the forces at the end will join for just anyone. So now I only have to beat 26 Zerglings, 7 Hydralisks, 2 Ultralisks, plus 6 large eggs and 35 small eggs with 3 roaches. Or do I? Remember in the Yagdra fight when I would use the faraway roach to draw attention away from the ones that actually mattered? Well, that works here. Dahaka's forces get absolutely slaughtered off screen, but there isn't much I can do about that. They didn't want my help after all. But I can draw every enemy to the far roach. Then, when it gets under attack, burrow it again, and wait for the stampede of Zerg to catch up to my little six-legged buddies, running as fast as they can, for their lives depend on it. Though I did discover that once you rescue HotS forces at the end, all of the enemies from this section decide they would like to dine on the remains of HotS' right arm and converge on it, which is very silly of them. And yes, I could have done this for the Yagdra section, but it was small enough that pulling the enemies apart was actually fun, and Yagdra herself was by far the most difficult part of the run, bar nothing. Did you know that a burrowed roach can, for the most part, out-heal all of Kraith's damage? By the end, I had devolved into using the Whack-a-Roach strategy from Yagdra, but I first tried him since he was mostly dead before I needed to do this. I probably could have bumped the difficulty back up from casual at this point, but given that the fight was still kind of close, all of my Hydralisks were dead and I only had 5 roaches left, I think this might have just been the same fight, but burrowing and unburrowing roaches for an extra hour or something. As per tradition, the Ultralisk, 4 Hydralisks, and 1 real combat unit would not join me, and were not long for this world. At first, I tried burrow microing and actually fighting the creeper banelings, but I quickly realized that running up to them to start a bunch of them on their explosion timer, then running away was far more effective. This became slightly more dicey when the actual primal forces started barraging me and I had to use a distraction roach back in Kraith's arena to get them to go away, and the creepers decided to use their map hacks and know exactly where to explode when I burrowed. This section was altogether pretty fun, but not very challenging. And hey, look! Because I was microing my heart out and the primal forces never managed to get to the distraction roach, all of the forces from the beginning actually survived. This means I had a lot more stuff than usual going into Sliven, given I started Yagdra with 4 roaches and began her with 7 roaches, 8 Hydralisks, and an Ultralisk. In my first attempt, most of them died immediately, but in my second I actually unburrowed all of my forces before starting the fight, and decided it was best for the Hydras and Ultra to just attack Sliven and not get any attention past that. And given how close I got while only having 4 roaches alive, I was pretty confident this would work. And wow, did it! The Hydralisks died almost immediately, but got some decent damage in, but the Ultra stayed alive until she was down to about a quarter of her health. He died a hero. And now, with 7 roaches at my disposal, Sliven went down pretty easily. I didn't even lose any. And Zervin wasn't really that bad. A better player might have been able to complete this mission on a higher difficulty, since roaches have such a high skill ceiling, but this is the only mission where I needed to drop the difficulty, and given that I still spent well over 3 hours on this mission alone, I don't feel bad about it. After the brutality of Supreme, domination was just that. Absolute domination. Just like a lot of the macro missions in this run ended up being. The initial defense against Zagara was a bit tricky, but I was never under threat again. I went for Lurkers, since they're normally such a meme, but actually pretty good against Zerg, though the Mutalisks around did mean that the baby Lurkers were pretty useful. The only thing interesting that happened here is that I wasn't able to beat the mission normally, since I don't seem to be able to collect eggs, so I had to camp outside of Zagara's base, building a massive army myself, but this was a free win. The Bone Trench was a bit more interesting, but if there is one thing I can say about the way this mission went for me, it is swarm hosts. They're bad, but I was getting pretty bored and thought trying them out would be a good idea. Then I immediately thought better of this, burrowed my swarm hosts near the bottom base where a lot of the attack waves come from, and pushed on with queens. Since Mend is noticeably missing from my kit, I did make extensive use of queens throughout the run as my only reliable source of healing. Other than that, the mission went pretty normally. Swarmlings are really good, and the only thing that ever actually threatened my base was a pair of wraiths. So scary. I even decided to clear out the mostly pointless Dominion base to the northwest once my swarm hosts were done with the south one. I thought I'd stalled the Gorgons long enough by delaying getting the Scourge Nest to clear the final Dominion base, but swarm hosts just didn't cut it once missile turrets and Thors joined the party. Oh, and I can't grab the bonus. Not sure why, though. There's been a few missions that's been the case, but it's been such a non-issue that I didn't even really feel the need to mention it, especially since I was already past level 35 and had been using the passives up to this point, so a lot of them were just pointless areas, though I still foolishly tried to clear them if it was possible. Old Soldiers was a bit tricky, since you're intended to use a very powerful hero character to deal crippling damage to Warfield before he can get his nukes online, but I'm not sure who in the lore of StarCraft could do that, so we're stuck with Zerglings and Banelings. I struggled to clear one base. On my first attempt, I went for the gold base, and mostly cleared it before going back to my base and... Hello there. Who are you? I executed this weird stranger in my base and continued pushing towards the gold base. This went very poorly. I did manage to clear the gold, but my lack of real momentum combined with trying to build mutalisks on a mission chock full of missile turrets, Vikings, and splash anti-air Thors meant I folded under the pressure. I restarted and pushed for the far less defended blue base, and this time it went much better. I kept trying to make mutas work, but after losing an entire flock to an attack wave with 2 Thors in it, I did not learn, and lost another half a flock to a missile turret with shockwave missile batteries, after a very unfortunate case of F2-itis. But by this point I had a solid force of aberrations and raptorlings, with my swarm queens in the back, so the mutas were a formality. Warfield's fortress fell, and then I took a break from the challenge for over a month before a certain StarCraft 2 challenge runner put out a call for video editors, and I decided I should probably get this video out. After going to Skygear, having forgotten all of my evolution choices, I attempted to complete the rest of the run without reassigning them. I'd been playing through the archive since Supreme, so this was mostly just to atone for not having to play a bunch of evolution missions, and trying not to cheat as much as possible. Also, in my month break, I remembered how to livestream, so that's why the image quality looks better and my face isn't mostly shadows, sometimes. So you're welcome. This mission really wasn't too bad, except for my strategy being to build mostly infestors and mind control all of the good units, but it did mark the endgame of Heart of the Swarm, and money was becoming an issue. Zerglings were not always the correct answer anymore, and the usually one base economy that you have to sit on for a long time meant that I didn't always have the money for the correct tools. But despite that, I played like a complete fool to prove that this mission is not that hard. The pressure against you is so minimal, and you don't even have to do that great of a job defending the infested since they are helpful but by no means integral to winning. I basically won this mission on the backs of 2 siege tanks, and they will continue to be some of my best units going forward whenever I can get them. Who knew a unit that hits for a bajillion damage from a quadrillion range in AoE would be pretty good? Hand of Darkness, on the other hand, actually provided some difficulty, though most of it was me just losing my army for no reason. Luring the first hybrid into the Dominion base worked well enough, but I was never able to get enough momentum to actually kill the base directly to my west, normally a staple of this mission. I lost my first attempt by trying to push into this bunker guarding the second hybrid without impalers, or by not choosing tunneling claws for the roach, your pick. I restarted and got impalers quicker, and that made the rest of the mission relatively smooth sailing since they were a steady source of making it difficult to die. That is after I remembered what order the hybrids spawn in, or paid attention to the minimap ever. After restarting and pushing the correct direction and taking a base in the process, the mission evened out. With my economy established, the enemy always folded to my bulky roaches in the front, spawning more roachlings to tank and the hydras in the back dishing out real damage. Unless I started the push too late, and the hybrid created a very cinematic but very cosmetic explosion in my base that made me lose for some reason. Most of the times I had to reset were because I tried to push into the west base, and it was a miserable failure. I baited the second to last hybrid into the final Dominion death base, and realizing I had lost most of my F2 units to pull that maneuver, I sent in my 9 lurkers to maybe put a dent in the final hybrid while I scrounged up enough forces to kill it. And then they just won. Hybrid are such a silly unit. The ultimate weapon of the final war, indeed. Stukov Temple mission does not involve. After walking through a slightly more difficult than normal no-build segment with a weird civilian lady standing in my way, the mission was absolutely normal, and to nobody's surprise I mind-controlled every scout I could get my hand on. I love scouts. With friends like these was pretty fun as always, but obviously nothing to talk about. Conviction is surprisingly doable, all things considered, until I redid it without infestors, which took almost an extra hour. So you'll be seeing a combination of footage from when I first played the mission and my second attempt after I had finished the rest of the run where I killed all my infestors. You start off with a very powerful hero unit whose control is wrenched away as soon as you pass the point where your army joins you, and are promptly unloaded directly into a Terran meat grinder. But fortunately, some of those units are Hydralisks, so I slither them away instead of trying to engage the Terrans and escape with 2 baby Impalers and 4 baby Banelings. After they grow up, the Impalers were obviously enough to clear the first group of Terrans who have no detection, though the next group would be a bit more difficult, not because Impalers couldn't clear them given time, but because reinforcements were dropped directly into the fray, and having a feeling that 2 Impalers were not enough to solo this entire mission, including timed sections, I felt I needed them. Unfortunately, the baby Banelings had not grown up yet, and valiantly sacrificed their lives as well as their baby Baneling friends to save the much more important lives of 2 roaches and a queen. Not much, but certainly an improvement. The next section had a missile turret, but nothing too bad with careful kiting, but then there were ghosts. These had snipe. And even when I'd cleared everything except 2 half-dead ghosts, they managed to kill a full health roach. But my next set of reinforcements came as they died, so I now had 2 more baby impalers to work with, as well as an aberration and 12 baby banelings. After they grew up, I pushed into the next area, where I got my first infestors, which were promptly executed. Impaler slow clearing was the name of the game here, and then the mission gave me a purple Drekken laser drill to blast through the next door? Weird. But all of the 4 waves that came to kill it folded easily, even though I most definitely did not remember which door was which. After leaving the laser drill room, it was back to impaler crawling. I lost 1 roach for no reason, clearing the ghost guarding the bonus objective that I couldn't pick up, but the next 2 rooms were smooth sailing, even though a big powerful hero unit had to swoop in and open the door for me. The next timed room was easy enough to clear, except that I was very worried about unit losses. On my winning attempt, I had lost an impaler, but not much else of value, and I was pretty worried about that going into the timed section. There was a very specific set of things I had to do correctly to both clear the Terrans fast enough to not lose to time, but also retain enough units to actually clear the final prison room. Slow clear the first room with impalers, or at least the 2 Thors, then clear what I can out of the next room with impalers, and dive the elite siege tank, making sure not to lose anything too important. Walk past the technically hostile enemies in the next section, and use the impalers to clear the 2 siege tanks and bunker while using the prisoners as a distraction. Clearing any more is too slow, but leaving the heavy hitters alive is too damaging. While the army is clearing that area, move the impalers to the next, so that the Reaper's AI can be manipulated with what few banelings are left into walking around while the impalers kill them, or the banelings connect. Skip the next defenders. If you're sneaky, you can get by them without the marauders hitting anything important and concussive shell becoming a problem. Use only the impalers to clear the gate squad. They'll attack the gate for a moment, so it's not the worst thing in the world to take a bit more time here. Try to save the Zerglings and especially the Hydralisk so it can become an additional impaler. Once the gate is cleared, the impaler should be as far to the front as possible, and use the Ultralisks that drop here as a distraction so the impalers can get in position where they can shoot all the relevant defenders and win with less than 20 seconds left on the clock. Not even close. Planetfall was an unexpected difficulty jump, given that macro missions up to this point were usually cakewalks, but it came down to a lack of money. You're intended to have far more early power than you get for a mission like this, where you start on 1 base and are expected to wrest control of a few more before enemy attacks overwhelm you. Maybe an early hero unit that isn't as important in the late game, but is able to do a decent amount of clearing by herself would help alleviate these economy problems. But, as always, the answer was impalers. I tried to get broodlords off the ground, but they just died anytime Vikings showed up and were so expensive I never got more than 3 before the massive Marine Goliath attack wave. Units that also happened to be fantastic at getting underneath broodlords. But the lack of attack wave detection meant that impalers melted all the attack waves, and the sieged power of the impalers combined with the few siege tanks and battlecruisers that I had managed to mind control meant that the mission really wasn't too bad, and I was in position, of course. This mission played basically normally. There were a few close calls with Zerg getting caught in the death field having to chase sieged tanks into it, but the most interesting thing that happened was me configuring my stream wrong and discovering a new voice line I'd never heard before.
I don't think File Explorer's the problem.
What are you doing? Destroy the power link.
So after the Dahaka section, wait, who's this? What happened here? This feels like cheating. I suppose I can just kill her. Respawning? What kind of broken hero unit is this? I can't use this. I guess I just can't F2 now, but wait, that's right. I'm bad at the game. No big deal. I can just put her in a box and go on with life. Wait, why is she back? Oh, I mined out my mineral fields, and this back wall isn't solid, apparently. Full wall of buildings. Fine. Oh, hey, and I won. I tried to use Leaping Strike to isolate her on an island, but I only had Kinetic Blast, no Vipers, and she probably would have died in the field anyway. The building wall was the best solution, and it's pretty funny that this happened on this otherwise free win of a mission. Let's be honest. We were here for Supreme. This mission very much isn't the hardest in the run. I reset once due to an unfortunate Warhound incident, built Tarask Ultralisks, and won. So instead of this anticlimactic final mission, let's show you the exact time I spent on each mission, in order of least time spent to most time spent. Given that it was the 5th highest time in the run, the Reckoning was no cakewalk, but not nearly as brutal as Supreme, which I spent over 3 hours in the Yagdra section alone, and in the end it only ended up beating on casual, in addition to Conviction getting its own dedicated stream without infestors.
But regardless, this was a fun run. Not the most challenging, but a joy to put together. I have a few more challenge run ideas that hopefully I can get recorded sometime, but I'm also a full-time audio engineering student and have lots of other projects, so no promises. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.